Hey there, and welcome to my channel. I'm Ashley Willingham, a sinner saved by grace, and an author of clean Christian fantasy romance books filled with adult characters, action, adventure, on-page prayer, and God's truths. You're listening to the free serialized audiobook for Ink and Ivy, my cozy Christian fantasy romance, Book One in the Gracehaven series. Don't forget to like and subscribe. God bless and enjoy.
Chapter 12.
Miss Fairwood.
A deep, familiar baritone rumbled, the words a soft vibration that brushed across the very top of her head. Ivy's mouth went dry. She whipped her head around and tilted her chin up. And there was Mr. Vael again, staring down at her with his hard, perfectly sculpted features set in that infuriatingly expressionless mask of his. For a breathless second, he remained perfectly motionless against her before he took a deliberate step backward, re-establishing a gentleman's distance. Slowly, he arched a single eyebrow. Her pulse spiked. Had she truly just crashed headlong into Mr. Vael? Scrambling backward, she stumbled over her own skirts in her haste to retreat further from his presence. Her leather satchel swung wildly, sending the many glass vials inside into a chaotic, clattering symphony. Then she slammed against the tailor shop's front door. The doorknob caught her squarely between the ribs. She clenched her teeth, fighting hard to keep from crying out in pain. Mr. Vael remained motionless all the while, observing her flounder about like a startled pheasant.
Miss Fairwood,
He murmured again, his tone entirely devoid of inflection.
are you quite all right?
I'm perfectly well, she snapped, curling her hands into fists. She was hardly a stranger to crashing into things. She just wished she didn't have to make such a fool of herself in front of him. Squaring her shoulders, she shoved herself away from the tailor shop door. Good day to you, Mr. Vael. Without waiting for a reply, she pivoted on her heel and set off back toward the Honeybloom. She didn't even realize he was following her. Such was the unnaturally quiet tread of his boots against the cobblestones, until the dark slate of his coat appeared in her periphery. His long legs easily matched her frantic, hurried pace.
Is all well at the Whitfields' residence?
He asked, his tone adopting an oddly casual, almost conversational cadence as they walked side by side. He indicated her satchel with a dip of his head.
I was told you are the town's chief herbalist.
Ivy slanted a highly suspicious glance his way. Why was this man making inquiries about her? Yes, she informed him, her own voice wooden. Little Abigail has a cough, but I have faith she will soon be on the mend.
The Lord willing?
Mr. Vael murmured as they came to a pause outside the bake shop's large glass windows. Yes, Ivy agreed automatically, blinking with surprise. The Lord willing? Was she truly having a civil conversation with Mr. Vael, free from accusations of her flinging herself at him, or the embarrassment of him overhearing her speaking ill of his person? She tried to summon the resentment she had felt toward him just moments ago in Abigail's bedroom, the firm reminder that this infuriating man had stolen her dream shop out from under her. She needed that anger to act as a shield, to protect her from acting ridiculous in his presence. Yet, she found such resentment annoyingly difficult to grasp in the face of his sudden conversational air. An awkward pause fell, leaving her glancing through the windows into the Honeybloom's interior. There was no sign of Bastian, Daphne, or Felix. They must have all dispersed after Marigold disappeared into the kitchen and she raced off to make her house call. Marigold. She still needed to check on Marigold. And then there was this business of writing her first letter to Fern. Her heart leapt at the prospect. Glancing back at Mr. Vael to find him still standing there, seemingly studying the cobblestones beneath his boots, she prompted, Was there something you needed from me? At the question, the man's demeanour instantly cooled. The fragile conversational air between them vanished, frosting back into a detached, businesslike mien. Reaching into the pocket of his coat, he procured a folded sheet of parchment and held it out to her.
I have come to deliver the copy of our contract my housekeeper drew up for you.
He crisply explained. Ivy cautiously snatched the paper from his hand, her eyes narrowing. "I marvel at the fact that you would deign to do such a menial task yourself." She couldn't help but needle him, rather than simply sending along your housekeeper to make the delivery for you. An unreadable emotion flashed through Mr. Vail's diamond blue eyes, there and gone in an instant, quickly smothered.
"It is Sunday, Miss Fairwood,"
the man stiffly pointed out.
"Naturally, I have given Mrs. Creedy the day off. Aside from—"
Something rather akin to irritation tightened the line of his jaw.
"a brief errand she ran for me earlier, simply because I could not find her in time to reassure her that the errand was no longer necessary."
An errand? The gears in her mind began to whir, her curiosity naturally piqued by his sharing of this strange, unprompted detail. She toyed with the folded piece of parchment in her hands. What manner of errand? A dark shadow passed over Mr. Vail's face, every shred of lingering emotion instantly wiped clean from his marble visage.
"It no longer matters."
Clasping his hands behind his back, he offered her a deep bow of his head. Whether he was being sincere or subtly mocking in his gentlemanly manners, she could hardly guess.
"Good day to you, Miss Fairwood."
Ivy parted her lips, fully intending to bid him a polite, albeit equally chilly farewell. But he swiveled sharply on his heel and started off back down the street toward his shop before she could even conjure forth the words. What an infuriatingly mercurial man. Frowning to herself, she stood on the sidewalk and watched him go. He only retreated by a scant few strides before he froze in place. When next she blinked, he had already returned and was standing before her again. She stumbled backward with a gasp, her heart skipping a beat. She had not even seen him move.
"Miss Fairwood,"
he murmured, seemingly oblivious to her shock.
"though I have absolutely no right to pry into your personal affairs, I find myself compelled to ask all the same. Who is Mr. Hayes?"
Each word fell from his lips on a clipped cadence, as if speaking to her now physically pained him. Her frown deepened at such an abrupt question. "Mr. Hayes is the town's blacksmith."
"No."
Mr. Vail snapped with a sharp jerk of his head, taking a single half-step closer. The sudden proximity made her flinch in surprise, her back pressing against the brick facade of the bakery as that rich, dizzying wave of ink and chocolate engulfed her once more. Ice-blue eyes locked with hers, the elven man breathed out a slow sigh through his nose. When next he spoke, his voice was a good deal softer, gentler, as if to make up for his sharpness before.
"No, Miss Fairwood. I mean, who is he to you?"
For a few long moments, Ivy could only stand there, staring up at this lofty veritas gentleman, trying to ascertain whether he was mocking her. But, to her surprise, he looked entirely serious. Why in all Luminara did he wish to know? What did her familiar friendship with Bastian matter to him? "Well, I hardly think that is any of your concern, Mr. Vail," she whispered, unsure of what else to say.
"You're right,"
he breathed back, immediately retreating from that nearness.
"Pardon me my rude curiosity, Miss Fairwood."
Again he bowed his head. Again he turned toward his shop. Again, confusion snarled to life in her chest as she watched him go. She couldn't even begin to understand this man. She wasn't sure she even did want to understand him. And yet some madness seized her, luring her into blurting out, "He is my brother, Mr. Vail." The elven man stopped dead in his tracks and shot her a look over his shoulder. He raised a single eyebrow again, giving her a slow, intensely assessing once-over. Warmth flooded her cheeks beneath his renewed scrutiny. "That is to say," she hastily corrected, stammering over the words, "he is like my brother, but not my true brother. That would be rather absurd, of course, given that he is a dragon shifter."
"And you are part dryad,"
Mr. Vail softly finished for her, turning on his heel to face her yet again. The quiet certainty of his observation caught her by surprise. Given her complexion, most strangers mistook her for a wood elf. "Indeed," she whispered, her brow furrowing once more. "Half dryad, but how did you know?" Unclasping his hands from behind his back, He gestured toward the large terracotta pots, overflowing with seasonal flowers that Marigold kept flanking the bakery door. Ivy followed his gaze. The vibrant pink peonies and yellow snapdragons, which had only been budding that morning, were now in full, glorious bloom. They even seemed to have grown by several inches in the short time she had been standing there, their bright petals now leaning eagerly toward her skirts, perfuming the air with their sweet fragrance.
The flora responds to your nearness, Miss Fairwood,
Mr. Vael noted, his eyes tracking back to her face.
just as it would to a full-blooded dryad.
She just stared at him for a time, more warmth rushing to her cheeks, a foolish flush. What did it matter if he had noticed her? A heavy silence stretched between them. Again, Mr. Vael simply stood there, though now he no longer seemed to be in such a great hurry to leave. Desperate to fill that suffocating quiet, Ivy cleared her throat and noted, "You are a rather observant man."
One must be observant in my line of work, Miss Fairwood,
he countered without pause. A nervous laugh burst from her throat before she could stop it. As a purveyor of paper, she wondered aloud, finally finding the courage to tease him a little. But he didn't laugh. He merely offered her a tight smile and corrected,
in my former occupation, I suppose I should say.
He bowed his head once more, formal and brisk.
Good day.
Her heart gave another lurch when he added,
Until this evening.
Right, this evening. She still had to confess that she had been gossiping about him behind his back. She still had to apologize. Perhaps she should try to apologize now. But her tongue seemed entirely incapable of speech as she stood dumbstruck in the wake of such a strange conversation, her eyes trailing after him, observing the fluid way he prowled down the street. Chapter 13. Ivy pushed through the swinging door into the Honeybloom's kitchen, her thumb still rubbing the edge of the folded contract Mr. Vael had given her. Much to her dismay, even in his absence, her thoughts remained fixated on the infuriatingly odd man. Former occupation indeed. What manner of former occupation might he have had in Veritas that would have required him to be so observant? A constable, perhaps. No, he was entirely too well dressed to be a constable. The rhythmic splash of water and the clinking of plates broke through her musings. Ivy's gaze drifted across the room, past the heavy butcher block island occupying the centre of the space and the row of great brick ovens taking up the right wall, to the porcelain sink nestled beneath a row of paned windows. There, bathed in the slanted golden light of the afternoon sun, Marigold stood in her apron, still washing the dishes from their lunch. But at the soft thud of the swinging door settling shut, the sun-fae swiftly lifted her arm from the soapy water and dragged a wet sleeve across her eyes. "Ivy!" Marigold called over her shoulder. Her voice wavered, stretched thin with a brittle, false cheer. "There you are!" Ivy froze, Mr. Vael instantly forgotten. "Marie," she murmured, her chest tightening as she sidestepped the island and rushed toward her friend, tucking away that folded contract as she went. Stepping up beside the sink, Ivy gently wrapped an arm around the other woman's shoulders, mindful of her wings. "Marie, what's wrong?" For a moment, Marigold seemed intent on keeping that weak smile pinned to her lips. "Nothing," she whispered, staring fixedly down at the 2 plates left submerged in the suds. "Absolutely nothing." And then the dam broke. Marigold's face crumpled, a single tear streaking down her cheek. For a moment, Ivy could only stare. She could not remember the last time she had seen her best friend cry. "I just feel so awful for snapping at poor Daphne like that," Marigold confessed, the words pouring forth in a miserable torrent as she swiped that rogue tear away. "I don't know what's come over me of late. Perhaps it's just all this Fern business, the not knowing who he is, I mean." Another watery smile fixed itself to her friend's lips. "I'm so happy you have an admirer, of course. It's just all so abrupt. I wish we knew who he was." Ivy's mind snagged on those words. Silent now, she studied her best friend's face in profile as the other woman returned to her work of washing those last 2 plates. Frowning to herself, she considered Mary's sudden defence of Mr. Croft against Daphne's light-hearted theorising. Her gentle insistence that the gargoyle would never write a love letter. A startling revelation finally clicked into place. Did Marigold fancy Mr. Croft? Well, no matter what Daphne might think, Ivy carefully announced, watching her friend closely. I certainly don't think for a single moment that Mr. Croft is my secret admirer. Marigold's hands stalled beneath the soapy water again. For one, Ivy continued, making sure to keep her tone breezy, perfectly dismissive of any theories that the reclusive Mr. Croft might be her fern. He's never said more than a handful of words to me in all my time of knowing him. And for two, the man practically lives off your sourdough loaves and shortbread, Marie. Anyone so fond of your baking would never admire me. Why, everyone knows I'm a wretched cook. Gently tucking the last 2 plates into the drying rack with a soft chink, Marigold insisted, You are not that wretched of a cook. Ivy raised her eyebrows at the back of her friend's head. You must be forgetting that time I ruined one of your good pots by forgetting I was boiling water and leaving it on the heat even after the water had evaporated. At that, Marigold turned around to face her again, the tension slowly bleeding from her shoulders. You just need more practice in the kitchen is all, but no doubt you're quite right about Mr. Croft. He has been visiting the Honeybloom for so many years now, after all. Surely if he fancied anyone, he would have made his intentions known long before. The smile Mary offered this time was a good deal more genuine when her gossamer wings gave a sudden, eager flutter, their translucent scales catching the afternoon light. Oh, but what did this latest letter from Fern say? The very mention of the latest letter from her secret admirer was enough to make her heart leap. Taking a step backward from the sink, Ivy cupped her cheeks, suddenly desperate to hide the rising, foolish flush warming her skin. He has invited me to correspond with him, she confessed, her voice little more than a whisper. Marigold gasped at the news. Do tell me you're going to say yes? She only had time to nod her head once before the other woman was already stripping off her apron. Well, you must write it now. Upstairs, Marigold commanded, happily herding her toward the door. I'll deliver it to the post office for you on my way to see Daphne to offer my apologies for my rudeness, so you're not late for your dinner with Grandma Evelyn. Oh, how incredibly exciting. Perhaps he might reveal his true identity to you when he next writes back. Perhaps. She tried to agree. But her friend quickly cut her off with another delighted gasp. Perhaps he might be a gentleman from Lindenvale or Honeygrove. Someone who met you at last year's farmer's market and has been admiring you from afar ever since. Ivy threaded her arm through Marigold's as they headed out of the kitchen, winding their way through the quiet bakery and toward the staircase that led up to the apartment they shared. Perhaps, she conceded again, though this time less convinced. Last year had been the very first year the 3 towns pooled their resources together to host one large farmers' market during the summer months. It had been a resounding success, bringing in visitors from as far away as Guildenspire and Silver Peak. It was certainly a romantic thought that some man had been quietly pining for her all this time. But she struggled to think of a gentleman she had met at last year's market upon which she might have left such a lingering impression. But it wasn't an absurd notion. You'll be helping Daphne organise the market again this year, will you not? Ivy asked as they climbed the staircase together. So, you know which vendors will be participating. The question set the Sunfay's eyes sparkling with good humour. Indeed so. Well, more like I'll be organising it myself this year, though of course I will still ensure Daphne receives part of the credit. She is just so busy with the wedding, you know. Shyly, her best friend suggested. But no doubt I will need to compile a list of all the unmarried gentlemen taking part this year, just so we can see if any seem like a likely candidate for Fern. Finally reaching the top of the landing, they stepped into the warm, familiar quiet of their apartment together. The front door opened directly into a sitting room that perfectly married their 2 natures. The walls were painted a soft, buttery cream and hung with an eclectic mix of the bright landscape watercolours Mary loved and the pressed botanical prints she much preferred. In the centre of the room, a plush settee, and 2 overstuffed armchairs sat piled high with her many half-finished crochet projects, while Marigold's own were tidily tucked away. Lush, trailing vines spilled from macrame hangers in the corners of the space, while an array of healthy potted ferns and broad-leafed monsteras crowded the large side window. As they stepped inside the space, the plants gave a subtle, eager rustle, shifting just a fraction to lean toward her. Unlinking her arm from Marigold's, she made straight for her bedroom door to set about the task of penning her first letter to Fern. But her best friend trailed right on her heels, following her into her room. "Please, let me help you get ready for your dinner at the wisteria," the Sunfade gently insisted, already pulling out the small stool, tucked beneath her vanity, sitting opposite the desk. "It's the least I can do." Ivy eyed the other woman with fond suspicion. While it was true she needed to prepare for the dinner ahead, she was entirely certain Marigold's sudden dedication to her toilette had very little to do with the dinner and everything to do with wanting to read over her shoulder while she wrote her first letter to Fern. Still, she wasn't about to refuse the company. Besides, the afternoon sun outside her window had begun to dip toward the horizon, reminding her of just how fast the dreaded hour was approaching. She would certainly need help if she wished to look presentable. Fetching her writing instruments from the desk, she took a seat at the vanity and smoothed a sheet of fresh parchment over the polished wood. "Thank you, Mari. I'd appreciate the help." Behind her, Marigold took up a boar bristle brush and began rhythmically running it through the long, heavy lengths of her emerald green hair. "Would you like your hair up or down?" her friend asked, golden eyes meeting hers in the reflection of the vanity mirror. The question caught her off guard. She always wore her hair down, but perhaps Mari was thinking of poor Mr. Vael and his delicate veritas sensibilities. A smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she tried to imagine how the man might look at her if she floated into the wisteria, all prim and polished like a fine lady from the capital. It might actually be fun to surprise him, to show him just how well she could present herself. Pursing her lips, she quipped, "No doubt if I were to wear my hair up, Mr. Vael wouldn't know what to do with himself. I'm sure that seeing us wear our hair down all the time here in Gracehaven has him quite convinced we are all uncultured barbarians." Marigold chuckled softly, her hands already gathering up her emerald locks and sweeping them behind her head to test the look. "Up then. You do look so fetching with your hair up. Mr. Vael is sure to accept your apology at once." Her friend frowned. "But what if he finds you so fetching that you end up with 2 suitors instead of just one?" Those words were just the splash of cold water to the face she needed. Down, she decided at once. Why should she dress herself to please Mr. Vael? He wasn't the man who had just written to her to ask her to correspond with him. He wasn't the man who thought her most intriguing. She ought to leave her hair loose and wild, a proud banner of her dryad heritage, just to prove she didn't care what the stuffy, arrogant high elf from Veritas thought of her and her manners. And that was exactly what she would do. "In fact," she added, her smile turning sly, "would you mind weaving some of your silk flowers through my hair to match my usual green dress? I want to look as if I just rolled out of the woods before coming to dinner." A quiet laugh escaped Marigold at the idea, but her friend obliged all the same, happily setting about such work. While the other woman carefully pinned the false blooms throughout the cascade of her tresses, Ivy dipped her quill into her inkwell and hastily committed her words to a man actually worth her time and consideration to the page. "Dear Fern, I must begin by expressing my surprise over receiving your letters. They were most unexpected, but quite welcome. Thank you for your exceptionally kind words, for bringing a much-needed smile to my face, and for the wonderful strawberry cake. It was truly delicious and a beautiful surprise in the midst of what has been a season of unexpected shifts and uncertainty in my life. Did you bake it yourself? I am pleased to say that I would be absolutely delighted to accept your invitation to correspond. I, too, find you most intriguing, and it would be a true pleasure to come to know you better through the written word. Even knowing your true name would be such a delight, as I have concluded that Fern must be a pseudonym. I wish I could write more to you now, but I fear that I have another engagement to keep. I will eagerly await your next letter, praying that you do not intend to keep me in suspense as to your identity for too long. One can only bear so much mystery. Sincerely, Ivy Fairwood. Chapter 14. The rich aroma of roasted pork tenderloin glazed in a dark cherry reduction filled the Wisteria Inn's private dining parlour, making Ivy's mouth water. It was Grandma Evelyn's specialty. She made it for every occasion, from Easter dinner to Christmas. But tonight, the older woman had elevated it with a side of perfectly piped whipped parsnips and tender asparagus spears. A meal clearly designed to impress the Vaels. Ivy carefully scooped up a bite of both pork and parsnips on her fork out of sheer habit rather than hunger. Oh, the dinner was absolutely delicious, and she longed to savour each bite. But with each passing moment, her appetite failed her that much more. She had never before felt so uncomfortable in the wisteria, so out of place. For years after the death of her parents, when Grandma Evelyn had taken her in, the wisteria had been her home. Now she felt like an outsider, and how could she not, forced to sit directly next to Mr. Vael? She flashed a miserable look across the table, trying to catch Grandma Evelyn's eye. Why did she have to be seated right beside him? The older woman ignored her, though, too busy conversing with little Elodie to notice how uncomfortable she was. Perhaps this was a punishment. Her one consolation was that her plan regarding her appearance had clearly worked. Aside from the first moment she had arrived at the wisteria, when the man had seemed incapable of doing anything beyond staring at her hair, he hadn't glanced at her once after they had been seated next to each other. Neither had he spoken one word to her. Gone was the man who had walked alongside her on the sidewalk earlier that afternoon, pressing her about the nature of her relationship with Bastien. In his place now sat a statue carved from ice, well dressed in a sharply tailored emerald green coat with a bronze waistcoat to match. With his gaze fixed stubbornly as he ate with silent precision, clearly he was wholly intent on ignoring her very existence. And that suited her just fine. Across the table, sitting next to Grandma Evelyn, little Elodie was a charming miniature of her father in her matching emerald silk frock, complete with a dark velvet sash. At least she was his miniature in regard to her appearance. But when it came to the matter of disposition, Elodie seemed to be the opposite of her father in every way. "And how are you finding Gracehaven so far, my dear?" Grandma Evelyn prompted the girl, offering her a warm smile over the rim of her water glass. "Have you made any friends? Is our school to your liking?" "Oh, yes, thank you. My teacher, Miss Celeste, is very lovely, and I adore her father's shop. He sells the best candy," Elodie happily chattered, her fork and knife clinking lightly against her plate. "I just love Gracehaven. It is so wonderfully quiet here, and the air smells like trees. You wouldn't believe what Veritas smells like. But Gracehaven is so lovely, so picturesque, not at all like the capital." Taking another bite of pork, Elodie's eyes widened in immediate delight. "And this dinner is absolutely delicious. Not at all like the boring dinners Uncle Orevan likes to put on. He always serves too many vegetables." Lowering her voice, the girl informed them all in a conspiratorial tone. "He's actually Papa's cousin, but I'm to call him Uncle all the same. I only have one true uncle, though, Uncle Darius." Elodie's bright conversation cut straight through the suffocating silence surrounding Mr. Vael. It was almost impossible to fathom that this sweet, vibrant creature was related to the cold man sitting beside her. Perhaps she took after her mother. "Oh," Grandma Evelyn exclaimed, "I did not realize you had a brother, Mr. Vael." Finally, the elven man spoke, but only to force out the words as if his jaw were suddenly made of wood.
"Yes, a younger brother. He lives in Guildenspire."
And that was that. All conversation on their side of the table died. Offering up a tight smile, Ivy murmured across the table to the only guest seemingly versed in the art of conversation. "Well, I'm so glad to hear you're settling in well, Miss Elodie. And you have arrived in Gracehaven at a wonderful time. There is so much to look forward to in the coming months. Easter will be here before we know it, and then the summer farmers' market. She paused. Oh, but before all of that, Miss Daphne and Mr. Felix will be hosting a party to celebrate their engagement. It is to be a proper ball, and everyone is invited. The moment the words left her mouth, Ivy's stomach clenched as she realized she had forgotten to order that new gown again. Not that she truly had the spare coin to afford one, especially now that she had to squirrel away every hard-earned copper for a plot of land. Elodie gasped, practically bouncing in her chair. A ball! Oh, Papa, may I attend, please? Mr. Vael shifted his weight just a fraction, though his gaze remained fixed firmly on his plate, his jaw tight.
You are not yet out in society, Elodie,
he murmured, his tone cool and matter-of-fact. Ivy coughed into her water glass to cover her sudden laugh. Not yet out in society? Where did he think they were? At last, the man flicked a glance her way again. A fleeting sidelong look, his expression still utterly devoid of emotion. She was beginning to think high elves had trouble feeling anything at all. But clearly, that wasn't true, given the way the bright hope vanished from Elodie's face in the next instant, her small features crumpling with visible disappointment. She lowered her chin, staring miserably down at her plate. Ivy's fleeting amusement surrounding Mr. Vail's rigid manners evaporated. She carefully set her fork and knife down. Still, the silverware hit her plate with a sharp, ringing clack that echoed loudly in the quiet parlour. Turning in her seat, she faced him head-on, throwing caution entirely to the wind. You are no longer in veritas, Mr. Vael, she pointed out to him yet again, fighting to keep her tone just as matter-of-fact as he seemed so fond of being. This is Gracehaven, and a country engagement party is hardly the strict social gauntlet of the capital. There would surely be no harm in allowing Elodie to attend. Other children will be in attendance. Perhaps Elodie might even make a new acquaintance. The girl perked up, peeking back toward her father as a spark of hope ignited in her eyes once more. Setting down his own fork and knife, Mr. Vael finally turned his head to gaze down at her properly. The wall that had been erected between them since dinner first began cracked, replaced in a moment by the full weight of his diamond-hard focus slamming into her, whisking her breath straight from her lungs. But she lifted her chin, stubbornly holding her ground, refusing to look away from his striking blue eyes.
A crowded ballroom is thoroughly chaotic, Miss Fairwood,
Mr. Vael countered, his voice dropping low, as if the words were meant for her alone.
It is loud. The company is distracted. It is hardly the proper environment for a young girl, for anyone, to make a genuine acquaintance.
I suppose that depends on how one defines a genuine acquaintance, Mr. Vael, she countered, the words spilling from her lips before she could properly think them through. But I dare say that a ball is a perfectly fine place to enjoy oneself and meet new neighbours and friends. Mr. Vael arched a single eyebrow.
I am defining a genuine acquaintance, Miss Fairwood, as one forged through proper conversation rather than simply cavorting about.
At that, she couldn't help but laugh, as if one cannot engage in proper conversation on the dance floor. She tossed Grandma Evelyn a glance, trying to enlist her help in ensuring sweet Elodie was allowed to attend Daphne's party. But the older woman merely took a slow sip of her water, her eyes twinkling with profound amusement over the rim of her glass. Beside her, Mr. Vail's chair creaked as he shifted slightly toward her, the rigid lock of his posture easing just a fraction.
Are you often given to talking while you dance, then, Miss Fairwood?
No. That madness seized her again as she looked back his way, fixing him with the full weight of her own stare, when she sweetly whispered, No, I much prefer to be antisocial and taciturn, don't you? Her pulse leapt against her collarbone. What had come over her? But at least Elodie was amused. A quiet giggle escaped from the girl, but Mr. Vael didn't so much as blink. He didn't yet relent. He simply leaned in that much more and whispered right back, his words brushing against the side of her face.
You would abuse me for preferring quiet conversation to being forced to shout over the din of an overly enthusiastic fiddle?
Unbidden, a thrill shivered down her spine at his sudden nearness, but still she refused to retreat. Still she held her ground, offering him a tight, excessively polite smile, a perfect mirror of the patronizing one he had given her on the day they first met. She murmured, "I would never abuse a gentleman for preferring peace and quiet, Mr. Vael. I will admit that I am not overly fond of crowds myself, but surely even you must concede that the measured steps of a country dance provide an excellent opportunity for learning to simply speak plainly with one another." She paused, letting her words sink in before she delivered her final blow. "Even if one happens to have absolutely no interest in their partner's charms,